Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something literally every single one of us faces on a daily basis. Imagine waking up to find a sudden, massive market shift, or maybe a new competitor just launched a product that renders your entire current strategy completely obsolete overnight. You're suddenly forced to make critical decisions with totally incomplete information. And you know what? That isn't just a bad day at the office anymore. That is just the structural reality of the 21st century. So, when you face these sudden shocks, like a major reorg, or when your team is looking at you, desperately asking for certainties you simply do not have, it's incredibly stressful. And there's a very real biological reason for that. Our biology defaults to a highly defensive, reactive response when it comes to uncertainty. Our nervous system is basically screaming, hey, this is dangerous. Get to safety before you even try to reason this out. But here's the good news. Biology also gives us neuroplasticity. With the right practice, we can absolutely transform that reactive panic into a genuine, calm, professional competence. Okay, let's dive into this. You've probably heard of the acronym VUCA, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a great way to describe the objective outside structure of the challenges we face. But here's the catch. Just gathering more data doesn't actually solve ambiguity. That brings us to BONI, which is a really fascinating framework proposed by James Caccio. BONI stands for brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. What BONI does is describe the subjective internal experience of the actual people living in that VUCA world. As a leader, it's absolutely crucial to recognize that this pervasive anxiety compromises your team's judgment and trust. So just understanding the context, not enough anymore. You really have to understand how your team is actively experiencing it. I want to just hit pause on our mental autopilot for a second here and ask you to reflect on a slightly disruptive question. Ask yourself, how long did I leave the situation open before I closed it? It's a tough one, right? People with a lower tolerance for ambiguity tend to rush prematurely toward false, clear-cut certainties. We desperately want to close an unresolved situation because sitting in the unknown is physically uncomfortable. We do this even when the data doesn't actually support our rushed conclusion. So the goal here is learning how to create a bit of space between that ambiguous stimulus and our immediate reaction. Now, what's really interesting here is the total paradigm shift brought about by Adrian Vernham's breakthrough research at University College London. He discovered that the tolerance of ambiguity is not some fixed personality trait that you're either lucky enough to be born with or you're not. No, it is actually a cognitive competence. It varies depending on the context, and most importantly, it can be deliberately developed through intentional practice. Building this mental muscle has measurable, real-world effects on the quality of your decisions and your overall leadership capability. To really build this competence, we need to wrap our heads around something called bounded rationality. This is a concept introduced by the brilliant cognitive scientist Herbert Simon, and it states a hard truth we all need to accept. Human decisions are always made with incomplete information, limited time, and finite cognitive capacity. You're never going to have the whole picture. From this premise, Simon derived this amazing concept called satisficing. It essentially means finding a solution that is good enough based on your criteria rather than chasing some mythical, optimal, perfect solution that simply doesn't exist. Honestly, let that be a massive release of pressure for you. Because you know what? One of the most costly traps you can ever fall into is waiting around for complete clarity before you finally take action. It just paralyzes you. Instead, you need what the research calls minimum viable clarity. This is just the bare minimum amount of clarity required to safely take the next step, without expecting to see the entire path stretched out ahead of you. Now, exactly what that minimum is will vary based on how reversible the decision is, the impact, and the time you have, but waiting for absolute certainty, that's a luxury you simply cannot afford. Now, operating with this minimum viable clarity requires something pretty profound. It's called negative capability. That sounds a bit intense, but it's basically the ability to just remain in uncertainty, mystery, and doubt without this irritable, anxious reaching after concrete facts and reason. The social pressure at work to have all the answers right this second is incredibly strong. So it takes real professional courage and cognitive integrity to look at your team and say, I don't yet know with sufficient clarity, and to confidently hold that space open. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between two critical operational modes we fall into. First, we have confirmation mode. It's fast, sure, but it is deeply flawed. This is when you seek out evidence just to support an interpretation you've already formed in your head. It's highly susceptible to confirmation bias. Instead, what you really want is inquiry mode. This means actively keeping multiple interpretations open on the table and seeking evidence to discriminate between them. Is it slower?
Yes, for sure. But it is absolutely the most adaptive and effective mode you can use in ambiguous contexts.
Let's move on and see how this builds when we bring other people into the mix. When you apply this inquiry mode to your team dynamics, you enter what Carl Weick calls sense-making, which is literally the act of constructing meaning together. You and your organization are interpreting these ambiguous, messy situations as a group to figure things out, rather than a leader just forcing a premature, rigid, top-down narrative that will inevitably shatter the second it's put under real pressure. So, practically speaking, how do we support ourselves through all this chaos? If you look at these 4 clean, green, and orange points, they outline our actionable pillars of happiness and ambiguity. First up is being, which is having a strong internal anchor of clarity about your own values, even when the external world is shifting beneath your feet. Second is we, leading teams by giving them certainty about the process and values, even if you lack certainty about the actual data. Third is discipline, deliberately exposing yourself to small doses of ambiguity to build up that tolerance muscle over time. And fourth is positive chemistry, literally regulating your biology through conscious breathing and movement so you can stand firm when the pressure hits. So the crucial point to take away here is that unmanaged ambiguity has severe costs across our 4 core energies. Physically, it spikes our cortisol. Emotionally, it makes us super defensive and drastically reduces our ability to listen. Mentally, it completely crushes our lateral creative thinking, and spiritually, it threatens our underlying sense of meaning. But by recognizing these exact costs, we can flip the script and transform them into resources. We can intentionally deploy bodily regulation, emotional awareness, strategic scenario planning, and a strong connection to our deeper purpose to completely counter that chaos. Because the reality is, ambiguity does not disappear. Our VUCA and BANI world isn't going to suddenly revert back to the way things were decades ago. True professional competence today is learning how to stand tall whilst being completely immersed in it. It's about learning to think better, to hold your nerve, and to make confident, impactful decisions using exactly what you have right in front of you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll leave you with this. Look at your own work today. Where can you finally stop reaching for false certainty and start practicing the courage of inquiry mode?